Welcome to Versefest 2020. Bienvenue à Versefest 2020. My name is Hubert Lucier and I have the honor to chair Verse Ottawa's board. Je suis le président du conseil d'administration de Verse Ottawa. This year marks our 10th festival. As with previous editions, our program comprises a wealth of poets in many genres from several continents. We present in English and in French. For reasons that will be obvious to everyone, this year also constitutes a first in that we're entirely online. That being said, we remain an Ottawa-based organization, and I want to acknowledge that Ottawa is part of the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The mindset in preparing this festival went far beyond let's grin and bear it. We've added several new formats to our sessions. We're making them accessible to all, free of charge. We're allowing for more dialogue between poets and the audience. Cette année introduit une grande nouveauté puisque nous vous accueillons exclusivement en ligne. Cela signifiait davantage que faire contre mauvaise fortune bon cœur, car nous avons enrichi notre offre de sessions originales qui permettront, je l'espère, de rejoindre et faire dialoguer avec les poètes participants un public plus large que jamais. Rien de cela n'aurait été possible sans le concours d'une équipe de bénévoles dévoués, ni sans les partenaires qui nous accordent leur soutien, parmi lesquels le Conseil des arts du Canada, la Ville d'Ottawa, le Conseil des arts de l'Ontario, Patrimoine canadien et l'ACFO d'Ottawa. Je les remercie chaleureusement, de même que vous, chers membres de notre public, tout en vous souhaitant un excellent festival. None of this would have been possible without a fantastic team of volunteers. Our various partner organizations devoted to the promotion of poetry in Canada's National Capital Region, as well as our sponsors, among which the Canada Council for the Arts, the City of Ottawa, the Ontario Arts Council, Canadian Heritage, and ACFO d'Ottawa. In closing, I want to thank you, members of our audience, and wish you a wonderful festival.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Versefest production. My name's Monty Reed, and I'm the director of the festival, and I'm honored to be hosting this session, which is American Interests, which is a forum we host every year to both to bring some American poets to our audience, but also to get a sense of, the things that are going on and the trends that are happening south of the border. And that border remains closed, of course, as we all struggle with the virus. But we're all online, and we're able to keep the connection open. And we're glad that so many of you have been able to join us for what is the 10th anniversary of Versefest. There are always many people to thank at an event like this. And today I'd just like to mention, again, all the volunteers who keep us running. We normally have drivers and bartenders and front of house staff. And of course, being online, we don't have any of that this year. But we do have writers and translators and sound techs and web slaves. And most of them are still volunteers. And I want to make sure they know how much we appreciate what they do for us. So thank you all. We have 3 poets joining us this afternoon. They're all from the Midwest. We didn't pick them that way. That's kind of an accident. We picked them because we like their energy, we like their commitment, and we like their poetry. First up is Phil Meters. Phil Meters was born in San Diego and grew up in Chicago. He went to school at Holy Cross College and Indiana University, and he currently teaches at John Carroll University in Cleveland. He translates Russian poetry, and he studies war literature. And his work has won many accolades, including an award from the National Endowment of the Arts. He's the author of quite a few chapbooks and a number of full-length poetry collections, the most recent of which is Shrapnel Maps from Copper Canyon Press. It's a book full of history but also human intimacy. It employs a range of techniques, and it's a big book with maps and erasures and lists and splintered texts and very carefully controlled couplets. It has the power of a drone strike, but it's not about the drones. It's about the persistence of a hurt and tender humanity. Phil Meters.
Hi, I'm Philip Metris. I'm so happy to be joining you on Ottawa Versefest. This is from Shrapnel Maps, which came out earlier in 2020. This is a book that's dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian predicament. And as it happens, this first poem is situated in my neighborhood in University Heights outside of Cleveland, Ohio, which is a predominantly modern Jewish Orthodox neighborhood. I teach at a Catholic university. Family. At the Catholic University, a speaker clicks through slide after slide of barbed wire, cattle chute checkpoints, and walls. His mantra? Occupation. What threatens the Christians, he concludes, is what threatens Palestinians. A woman stands up. I wanted to let everyone know, she says, that this talk was full of spin. I can't see her. She's behind me. I'm afraid to look back. The truth is the opposite. My heart goes out to her, standing in the heart of another country. The reason for the wall was that people were being attacked, she says, by terrorists. After all, the Arabs sold the land. It was too much trouble. I shrink back in my seat. And at a Catholic school, you should know what the church has done, especially during World War II. Then a man gets up. I can't see him. He's behind me. I'm afraid to look back. The Jews bought a tiny bit of land, but the rest was stolen. My heart goes out to him, standing in the heart of another country. But, he says, they did not buy everything, even if they buy Congress. I shrink again. She says, you have 14 Arab countries. Can't we have just one? They should take you in. He says, but this is our land. Why should we have to leave? Because Europe took it from us? That is why we fight. What about peace? Someone mumbles. He says, how can you negotiate over a pizza when one side continues to eat? She says, how can you negotiate over a pizza when one side's trying to stab you with knives? It goes on like this for a long time. Years, decades, generations. I sit like a child at the table, watch parents grip utensils, spit words like shrapnel. I hate how I love them. Ashamed, I look down, unable to bury the hot metal. According to this midrash for Rabbi Arik Osherman, one of the co-founders of Rabbis for Human Rights, the midrash says when Hagar and Ishmael are banished into the desert, before God builds a well, the angels cry, what are you doing? Don't you know the Suris, the Jewish people, are going to suffer at the hands of the children of Ishmael? And God, according to this midrash, says, right now in front of me, there's a child. Right now, this child is innocent. Look, I know some Palestinians would want to kill me and my children. I know some Israelis do not see Palestinians as human and use the law to keep us separate. But when I visit Palestinians, they waken their children to meet us in the caves where they live after their house was demolished. We sit on packed suitcases as they serve me tea. Their son who'd been tied to a windshield by the army, and the man in the kippah who'd come to his aid. The dance of the activist and the typist for Huwaida Araf, blocking a soldier from shooting demonstrators. She's one of the founders of the ISM. She inserts the inked ribbon of herself between the black roller of history and the alphabetic metal legs of that inverted insect. Rifles thrash the air, the targets scatter. She can't help it. Something in her grows each time she turns to face the rifle, grows as she covers its permanent erection. The typist lifts his wrists and legs hover to stamp. Where the rifle moves, she moves, a mirror following the lead of inevitable lead. She's the rifle unfired, shield of flesh, her arms overhead, before the muzzle, as if she could cradle a bullet. Back in my neighborhood. In the sudden chill, dogwood leaves blush. I no longer jog shirtless along sidewalks of the Orthodox, stitched kippas and flowing wigs hugging the skull, shielding the immodesty of hair. The sound of hammering in the air to nail temporary wooden homes outside less temporary homes, to remember how the ancestors wandered, their heads filled with words read from right to left and left to right, the ways the people had fallen away from the unnameable. Years ago, I canvassed for Kerry, talking at screen doors and shaking heads, promising his dogged support for Israel, knowing it could mean a wall between Ummi and olive trees she worries over like children. We saw each other on each side of a screen. I told the story to 5 shaking heads, then 2 bright nods to vote. I carried the light of those promises back home. I love the Sabbath, how our neighbors sojourn from home to God and God to home, carrying their story as scrolls on shoulders, sheathed in plastic during rain. Today I jog past the sukkahs wearing shalom and salam on my t-shirt, a flag above each lung, 2 languages, peace and hello. I pass confused faces, translating my chest, a language my neighbors know and do not know. Palestinae delineatio ad geographiae canones revocada. As there is no adequate Arabic version of As the Crow Flies, when you come into the land of Canaan, that is the land that shall fall unto you. The delineation of the borders, 1603. We are the distance, the Holy Land, once the Promised Land or Palestine, the distance of the journey in the wilderness and the conquest and partition. And as we were worthy of sketching it, so we will be worthy with our own eyes. The distance, as today it is called, of seeing walls rise, the distance between birds and Jerusalem. Kafar Yar Babi Qasim. This is a poem dealing with 2 massacres. One, the Baba Yar massacre in Ukraine in the early 1940s, and Kafar Qasim, which is a village in the West Bank. Kafar Yar Babi Qasim. Quote, all Yids of Kiev city must gather, heading back to the village from the harvest, and bring your documents and valuables. And some rode horse-drawn carts, others bicycles. If they open fire with gloved revolvers, if in Kafar Qasim they order, reap them. Some may choose to circle and shield you from. You circle to choose the one to shield from. You must not breathe. When kicked, you must not move. You must live the death they have come to prove. Bear the boot on your cheek, dirt on your face, and be the dead that they have come to make. Remember the names of the ones who covered you, whose riddled bodies your voice now speaks through. Back in my neighborhood, the daily contortions. He's rushing down the block, away from shul, dressed in black hat, black coat and pants, black socks peeking beneath lemon yellow Crocs. Yom Kippur, my daughter's 8-year-old friend Rachel informs us. You can't wear leather, you don't eat, you get the chance to become an angel. The kids are gathered around Yael's swing, whose arc's so wide you wonder if you're flying. The only grown-up I give underdogs, which means helping others to wing, as Layla says, still lacking letters. Yael, our neighbor, the spit and image of my daughter, refuses her pretzels. I don't give non-Jews pretzels, she explains. Then, but I can give them to my dog. But Adele's almost Jewish, Rahel insists. Aren't you, Adele? Who among us does not want pretziola, little rewards that monks would grant to children reciting Bible verses, which, read wrongly one day, would darken into Kristallnacht? The little arms folded in prayer, a crucifixion treat to savor and swallow. Here the daily contortions continue. Who can do what and who cannot? And by what law is it possible? And to sate which God hungry for our obedience? I want to shake this little angel, her flaming words expelling my daughter from the garden of her sunburned yard. But like in the dream, when the door opens to another room in your home, Rahel turns and breaks her pretzel, handing the savory splinter to Adele. This is a poem called Isdud for Fatty Judah. I learned about this place, Isdud, because Fatty's email address has it in it. And so I asked him and then learned that this was the village that his father came from, who was made a refugee in 1948. Isdud for Fatty Judah. Dear descendant of the disappeared, you ascend the pillar of your own air, spin and span whole abysses with lines translating there to here and here to where wind winds in dry waddies, hoists sea in handful after invisible handful. Isdud now your email address and digital image of branches through school windows. Within school ruins, a refugee points with his cane to what he only can see. You argue against the argument against yourself you yourself make, and home in. Kiss my blind eyes clear, close keyholes with opening homeland. You cradle in vowels what was not never yours. I'll hold it here till you return.
Our next poet is Laura Kasischke, just back from a sojourn in Scotland where she was in quarantine for a while. She was born in Michigan, and she now teaches at the University of Michigan. Her books of poetry include Wild Brides, Gardening in the Dark, Space in Chains, which won a National Book Critics Circle Award, and Where Now, which is a selected volume. Her work has won many awards as well, and she's received fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts and the Guggenheim Foundation. And she's also a novelist of international acclaim. One of her books, The Life Before Her Eyes, was made into a movie starring Uma Thurman. Her poetry, however, is usually grounded in domestic life. But what a strange, unpredictable domestic life it is. In my kitchen, she writes, in my nightgown, in my role as mother and wife, my hand on the teapot, and orangutans. She writes about Barney, the purple dinosaur, and about Charlie's Angels, for those of us who are old enough to remember who they were, and Bugs in the Salad. It's work that's full of surprises, moments of spite, and the quiet, generous intelligence of someone who can say, this grand foolishness, I embrace you. Laura Kasischke.
I'm very happy to be part of Versefest 2020 and hope to see all of you in person somewhere in another year. And I'm Laura Kasischke, and the first poem I'm going to read is called The Inner Workings. And I wrote it more or less pertaining to a strange neighbor I had for a while who had some sort of laboratory in his basement. I never got to know him, but I could see into his basement. I never got down on my hands and knees, but I could see into his basement window, and I'd pull in the driveway. And I just wondered what he was doing, what he was making down there. And, it got involved with some other associations, and it's called The Inner Workings. This afternoon, my son tore his shorts climbing a barbed wire fence. Holy Toledo, I said when he crashed back through the corn stalks with half of his shorts gone. The sun was ringing its sonorous, silent bell underground as someone's grandmother tucked an awful little cactus under a doily embroidered with buttercups. In prisons, exhausted prisoners napped, having brief and peaceful dreams, while beautiful girls in bikinis tossed fitfully in their shadows on a beach. And somewhere else, in some man's secret garden shed or basement, the watchmaker, the lens maker, the radio, the maker of telescopes, of rhetorical devices, the time maker, the eye maker, the voice maker, the maker of stars, of space, of comic surprises, bent together over the future, tinkering with the inner workings of its delights. This poem is called Look. Look, I bear into this room a platter piled high with the rage my mother felt toward my father. Yes, it's diamonds now. It's pearls. Public humiliation. An angry dime store clerk. A man passed out on the train station, at the train station. A girl at the bookstore determined to read every fucking magazine on this shelf for free. They tell us that most of the billions of worlds beyond ours are simply desolate, oceanless forfeits in space. But logic tells us there must be operas. There have to be car accidents cloaked in that fog. Down here, God just spat on a rock and it became a geologist. God punched a hole in the drywall on Earth and pulled out of that darkness another God. She just kept her thoughts to herself. She just followed him around the house, and every time he turned a light on, she turned it off. They say 1/12 of our lives is wasted standing in a line, the sacred path of that. Ahead of me, a man in black, his broad back. Behind me, a woman like me, unwinding her white veils. And beyond us all, the ticket taker, or the old lady with our change, or the officials with our food, our stamps, our unsigned papers, our gas masks, our inoculations. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't begun or ended. It hasn't granted us its bliss or exploded in our faces. The baby watches the ceiling from its cradle. The cat stares at the crack in the foundation. The grandfather flies the child's kite higher and higher. I set my husband's silverware on the table. A napkin beside my son's plate. Soon enough, but not tonight. Ahead of us, that man's black back. Behind us, her white veils. Ahead of us, the nakedness, the gate. Behind us, the serene errand boy, the cigarette, the wink and nod, the waiting. Beyond that, too late. Alcoholism. It had nothing to do with how much they drank. How much they drank. Christmas tree lit like a ladder on fire, the heart like a kerosene lamp. In France, a little dog who could dance the minuet. In Vienna, a deaf man writing symphonies in an attic. Strange things happened in our house the hour after happy hour. Call that one the hour of the tender parent, hour of the big happy plan. Love and tears and bravado, and a patience like dust settling on a slab of marble in a cathedral in a small medieval town. a town in which our ancestors laughed, passing a flask. That was the flask in which I was conceived, the test tube the world was made in. A blue vapor rose swirling from its throat, a thin veil that became close. And somewhere, a linear accelerator waiting, an atomic number assigned to every one of us. This homeland, a prologue, this country with no king, except its mercurial soul, its spirit, its tincture. Somewhere, stars, sex, libraries, and that music I've been waiting all my life to hear. Where was Bach before he reached my ears? Bach in the half-finished basement, Beethoven in the snow at the television's borders. A beggar somewhere found a $10 bill in the street. Oh, Bach was everywhere. Listen, at the bottom of the fountain, at the center of the mall, all those shiny coins. I could have dipped my hands right in if I hadn't been afraid to get caught. And the forest full of evergreen, moss and pine, and the canned scent of spring. They were perfectly happy for a long, long time. When I close my eyes, I can still see them wearing the fabric my memory is made of. Inexpensive, easy to clean. They were everything to me, in their plaid clothes, on our plaid couch. Forest. Being in quarantine and lockdown I wrote this poem long ago thinking about there will be days to come. I was thinking I would be dead then, not necessarily in quarantine, when I would have a lot of time to be alone, and that I should not feel so overwhelmed by the company of people, that I should enjoy it while I could. I had no idea that I wouldn't even have to be dead to learn that lesson. And this poem's about that. It's called Forest. There's a small one in my brain. Beyond the tiny house, the lawn by the miniature mower, the mall and its matchbox cars parked in the little lot. There's also an ocean, no bigger than an opal, my mother once wore on her left hand. At night, the fish still nibble the flesh of her fingers in it, and a casino the size of a sequin, a cathedral like a seed. But it's the forest that waits for me. How many times in this life have I wished to be alone? The other children were throwing sand on the beach. The elderly aunt who wanted me to sit on her lap. Someone humming in the library, whistling in the elevator, the checkout line, the sidewalk sale, the tourists leaning over the railing to get a better look at the falls, climbing the stairs behind me to the top of the Eiffel Tower. Midnight, the baby cries, the phone, the same friend with her same broken heart in Saskatchewan, the Greyhound bus, the party, the kiss, the man in the waiting room who wanted to tell me about his cyst. That forest, I will. Class strangely empty, children grown. No one's come to see this particular movie but me. Not another pair of headlights on the highway, not only for miles, for good. It's a small forest, but the only path through it ends where it began. It waits at the edge of the rest of it for me, saving up names and faces I won't be needing again. World peace. And I believe I'll end on this poem. World peace. A day like a mayfly on which someone slammed a Bible. All exoskeletal radiance and insignificance in the dark. We find ourselves the only mother and child who decided it was wise in this storm-impending crisis to come to the county fair. Sheep among strangers. One lone pony tethered to a pole. The prize pig speaks eloquently in his sleep on the tired subject of world peace. And the devil, who owns all this fairness outright, sits in a chair over there by the fence and lets his dog sniff around at the air. Briefly, it's air made from the kind of the repo men roll through the halls of the house to keep the mud on their boots from ruining your rugs, on the day that they stomp in and out with all the things you ever bought on credit, which in the end was everything you had. As Grandma used to say, we're going to have some weather. But at the moment, like petals, a soft spray of spit, we're made of it. And love, that slut, just runs around deep kissing everyone. So why are we blind to her wild suppositions 99% of the time? Or does love generally never love us quite this much? Well, might it suffice to say today, I'm struck dumb by the laughable notion of numbers, the whole hilarious idea of greed, and the absurdity of feeling anything but peace flies right over my head like a flock of alarm clocks in the breeze. Yes, Grandma, God rest your soul, we will definitely have some weather. But for now, the rides are quiet, the fun house is free, there are no lines, and at every gate, a patient man or woman waits for our tickets with an open hand and a... Thank you so much for listening and for being here.
Our final poet this afternoon is Johannes Granson. He was born in Sweden, and he moved with his family, I'm happy to say, to the United States when he was 13. He studied at the University of Minnesota, the Iowa Writers Workshop, and the University of Georgia. He's a poet and a critic and a translator and an editor. He and his wife, Joelle McSweeney, are the founders and editors of Action Books, one of the most vigorous and provocative publishers of translated poetry in the U.S. It's one of my favorite publishers. And I'm plugging them here because as I hunt down translated work for Art Poetry Magazine's regular translation feature, Action Books is one place I regularly look. His poetry collections include Haute Surveillance and The Sugar Book. His translations of Swedish poets include work by Asa Berg, Henry Parland, and Anne Yederland, and his essays appear in Transgressive Circulation, Essays on Translation, where he argues for translation as a deregulating embrace, as an infection, as a zone of deformation. His poetry has been called many things: fucked and funny and tender and sad and putrid and glitter covered all at once, according to Vice magazine. He writes, "When I say human body, I mean the kind that tears like lettuce. And when I say fear, I mean the kind you feel seconds before crashing into a wall. That's the kind of poem this is, the kind raised on excess television violence. It moves, for many, well beyond their comfort zone. And that's surely one of the things that poetry should do." Please welcome Johannes Granson.
Hello, thank you for tuning in, and thank you to Monty Reed for inviting me to your festival. I'm going to read some poems from a collection that's not been published. It's called Summer, and it's a series of lyrics. I started writing it in the summer of 2016 when I was in Sweden. It was a very beautiful summer, and the news from the US was threatening and interfering with the beauty of the summer. So this poem is a little bit about keeping things out. How do you keep things out? What do you keep out? It changes throughout the poems. After I went back to the US, a little bit later, I had a daughter who died, so she makes an appearance in here, and then it becomes a matter of what do you do with something like grief or anger? Do you let that in? What does that mean? Since I started in Sweden, that shapes the poem to a great extent, because my English was continually interrupted by Swedish words that would come in, either from me just having conversation with people or listening to pop music like I often do when I write, or read, or just from my reading of Swedish poets. So it's sort of a Swedish English. There's some Swedish in here. You don't need to know really any of it. Syrener means lilacs. Änglar means angels. Engelska means English. Dött means dead. Döttrar means daughters. Skuld is debt. Oskuld is virginity, or undebt, I suppose. But, and then there's others. It's really not important, but the most important part is that it creates this impure, it's a kind of impure music that I think shapes the whole poem. So I'm just gonna read through these. I'm not explaining anything. If there are words here that don't worry about it. Okay, here's the first one. I can't hear you. The lilacs are in bloom and the underworld is slow. I'm slowly listening to girls sing about the rabble in Syrenerna. They're at my door, the rabble. Pöbeln, the girls are in the lilacs, Syrenerna. I can't hear them. I have a telephone number tattooed on my shoulder, and the lyrics of the song on the radio seems to be, they're at the door, Pöbeln. They're at the door, drömmen. It's not a dream, summer never ends. The currency has lost the language inside language, treacherous lilac language, Syrener, made for girls like me. For me, the lilacs bloom like little fingerprints, hundreds of bloody little fingerprints. I can't hear you. I'm listening to the radio. My wife is feeding me pomegranate seeds. She's feeding me with bloody fingers. It's summer. It's summer. I can't hear you. Det är sommar. I can't hear you. La la la. Jag håller på med dödsgrejen, dikter om döttrar som inte är döda. I'm busy with underjorden, where my hands are almost as white. Du är nästan lika vit som havet. In a war song, i krigssången, I can't see you. I havssången, you have such a pretty gauze in front of my eyes. I can't see the children, their song is crawling like summer's summer. They're still alive. I'm still stained on the lilacs, which are Syrener. One thing is another. Inflation. Art is like silver, like bodies with silver on them, like summer with silver in daughters, döttrar, mercury, silver, quick, like silver, summer, crawls. I can't hear you. I have that oceanic look. That mother is my death letter look. It says I don't belong where I belong to June. The last June, 11 a.m. And I know what the secret is. What the secret does is lilac. The laurel aura makes summer sense to me, who's alone with my aftermath, and the teeth have been torn out of the mask that represents mimicry. Nobody wants to tell me with summer breaths where it hurts or who was injured when I broke into a toxic garble with a hissing snake for a heart. When I was sweaty and tired, I learned to kiss in the underworld with my mother tongue, and my hymns to inflation already sung in a dazzling killer language. I learned to speak in the most toxic state with my father tongue, while the war was at war with the war and the mother. War took place between summer and my virgin arms. I know the emergency state of being alive has little to do with my tongue. It has to do with the lies I tell my children with my father tongue. I'm just interviewing them for roles in Lilac Antigone. It's beautiful, but it's also a joke. I have a dead child in summer, I have trashed summer eyes with a million nightingales because I'm reading the plays of Eva Kristina Olsson. The riot of flowers transforms me from rat infested to infested by features that belong to delphiniums, and poetry is what my eyes belong to. Inflation is how my hands belong to frightening butterfly poses. I practice frightening poses with anemones, and they win, I lose. They win, I have to lose, to transform flowers into riots, upplopp, oljud, oskuld. I have a fever and flowers, riot against my torso. It's mimesis day. I'm transforming my disappearing act into silver poetry to pay my debt. No, I pay with delphiniums. No, I have paid too much for upploppet. I can't finish the poem. The flowers are too obscene. I have a kissing sickness. The Faust-sick after party takes place in nature. I don't believe in nature. I take place in the butcher shop. I believe the butcher takes my place in the rabble. I believe in ruins. I listen to ruins. Eternal love has fallen out of the top 20 this week. When the rabble gets to me, they are mothers, not my mothers, dead mothers. Dead children are part of the climate, like my ribs are part of the rabble. In my poems, they are too loud. The mothers are silent because they are mothers of the border, mothers of the trashed, mothers of the rabble that breathes inside this ruined abattoir, mothers who will later mother my revolver and teach me how to ornament a crime. The poodle asks me, what are you doing here? Why are you back, Medina? Cell phone bilder. They won't protect you. I know vem du är. Your mouth is full of seeds. You are staging yet another elegy for things that belong to summer. It's past. You are drinking the cleanest water, but you dream in butcher shops that you will no longer be in debt. In your poem, come home to me with your teeth. Your death will be cancelled if you will just do this one thing. Write my poem. Write it about ruins. It's where we will live in eternal love. And it's break my face now. You are already here. What are you doing to your face? I have already written your poem, but I keep writing it because I'm not finished with debt. I'm in debt in my poem. It's written to dötra. I don't want to be debtless. I want to be rifles and garbage and set fire to the sun, set flowers through the eyes of the rabble, let them extinguish me in garbage from the riot in the eternal love of engelska captions. I say now everything must burn. I need more seashells, but it is more like summer. Poets once crushed flowers here. Plug the bullet hole. The rabble wants to become media. I want to drink media and call that Somal. Call Stockholm Somal. The Riflemaker is building a new one to protect me from the rabble, he says. Its symbolism I silence, the rabble with nectarines. I eat nectarines while looking out the window. The nectarines are from summer, but summer somewhere else. The carcasses are from Poesine. The Riflemaker says it's from women's bodies. He wants to be cleaned. He wants to speak to history utan kropp. So he makes a rifle out of candy. I put it in my mouth. I love how the rabble looks at me like I'm the killer. I'm the captions. To write a poem about violence while towers collapse is my scam. A summer scam, I do it while drinking milk of paradise out of a rifle. But I have to get rid of it, the rifle, before the party starts, the party of no. To enter Undervärlden, you need a picture of yourself with a noose, with a violent leaf in your mouth. That's childhood. This is my idiot arms. I'm holding a child. I'm reading the captions. I'm carrying flowers. Each one represents a massacre. Each infant represents mimicry. I have döttrar I slakthuset. I miss them. Jag är inte längre rädd. In my mirror reflections, I drink the milk of 1,000 bullets. I massacre language. My wife says, you're anti-Orpheus. She also says, she's writing ransom notes for my liberation. Come and get me. I'm home. I'm exterminating home. I'm eating the seeds of summer. I'm reading captions, drinking Kool-Aid. It's hard to dance with a baby's breath. I write a poem for Venice in shocking red and burn the evidence. I write milk in red on the wall of the butterfly pavilion where I'm spending a summer writing poems about wanting to burn banks. Instead, I write a letter to a corpse, but don't be fooled. It's a hate poem in praise of smashing windows, burning cars, my lovely sub-sister, the milk, it's poisoned. I want to kill in blue. Kill the lights, sub-sister, speaks to me, tells me, kill the lights, tells me we have to go now, have to join the rabble, have to set fire to this room, have to photograph the ruins, the evidence, have to call that sublime, have to call this levothyroxine milk, have to call this poem all the garbage in the sun, have to pay for it with ashes, antimatter, antibody, anti-breaths. Thank you.